do a kickflip. Hey everybody, if you're wanting to improve your skills, get more comfortable with drops, today's video is one you're not gonna wanna miss. I think it's one of the most important techniques that's gonna help you on small drops, big drops, and general trail riding. Let's get into it. All right, folks, so I think that this is not so much a video about how to get better at drops, although I think that's definitely going to be the outcome. More importantly though, I think this is a really good skill to harness. Think Mr. Miyagi, right? Like the wax on, wax off mojo, right? This is a skill that shows your control and your dominance over the bike. And if you can perfect the skill, the technique, the timing, it will be applied to many different applications beyond the drop, and I think that's why I think this particular skill and motion is so important on the trail and just riding around. So the first thing you're gonna wanna do before you take it to a curb, which is what I think is the ideal place to start from for number one, is just come in, give a little preload hop, and then shoot your feet down and forward. And essentially what you're doing is very little pulling up and back with your hands. Instead, what you're doing is driving from the hips through the bottom of your feet. You're dropping the heels and rocketing the pedals out beneath you. So if you can envision that motion, even at a standstill, you can see that energy in which the bike launches forward. That's not from me moving or pedaling, that's from me taking those coiled up legs and pushing down through the heels. Now that was obviously a very exaggerated one, like that would have been a backflip if I were to try it off of a jump. But that motion is essentially what you're trying to control. When you enter or encounter an obstacle on the trail, a sidewalk, whatever it is, the speed at which you're traveling and what is beyond that drop are always going to change. So the amount that you're gonna need to use that rocketing technique is going to change. But why I think this skill is so important is that you can take it in a controlled environment like a curb, a 2-stair, a 3-stair, a 4-stair, or a little drop at a local park, and you can practice the timing and the control at different speeds, and you can play with front wheel landing, 2-tire landing, or a rear wheel landing. I would say you almost never want to be landing rear wheel first because that unsettles you. It creates a bigger impact for the fork when your tire slaps down, and it just doesn't settle you or set you up for the corner, the next rock, or whatever obstacle is coming. So you always want to be landing 2 wheels together, or sometimes even a very slight nose in. But the thing is, and what I see a lot of people doing and why I wanted to make this video is, so many people's front ends are landing first in a falling motion. You never want the front tire to fall and hit the ground first. You want to set it down first. And that is a huge, huge takeaway. You're the one that sets the front wheel down. It's not gravity pulling it down, because you're always gonna be along for the ride and you're gonna come down, and it's a matter of time before you go down. You want to give a little bit of a compress and just enough of a push to where you get that momentary stall. If you guys can see that, where the bike just for 1 second hangs up at that balance point where I'm off the back, the bike kind of sits, and then it comes back down. That momentary stall is something that you'll soon be able to control and dictate. That won't be gravity just taking you for a ride. You will be able to harness that ability to keep it up longer, to drop it softer, quicker, whatever that might be. So let's head to the first drop and show you guys how to do it and where the timing for the execution comes in. All right, so here's our first obstacle. I'm gonna come in, give that little bit of a lift. Now, if you look at the size of that, that's pretty close to a curb height. And again, why I like a curb is sometimes the smaller an obstacle is, the harder you have to work and the better you have to get at that skill to perfect it. And what else is great is that it's a really low consequence error. If you do mess up, you've only got, you know, a 4.5-inch curb to deal with. So what I suggest doing is coming into the curb at a decent speed, right? Maybe 3.5, 4 miles an hour, not too fast, but not too slow to where you have a hard time getting that wheel to stay up long enough for your back tire to come off. All right, so in this example, I'm gonna show you guys what it looks like when I keep the front end up too high. Chances are it'll probably result in a much bigger impact than is needed for a small drop. And when I do that, I'll probably have to exert more energy and effort to keep myself in line from that smackdown. All right, so you might have seen when that front tire landed, I used up a fair amount of travel, felt it, had to brace for it. Now we'll do one where I don't quite pick, well, where I pick up instead of using that rocketing with the feet technique, and show you guys what it looks like when that front wheel touches down. So this is how I see a lot of people drop. So if you just saw what happened there, I just picked up with my hands and my arms. And when you do that, you're almost on a hinge, right? Because your legs aren't doing any effort, it's just your upper body. So it's kind of like, what are those little bobble things that go in the water? Try to find a clip of one. But so when you just lift up with the arms and your legs stay in the same fixed position over the bike, as you come up, there's only one way that the bike's gonna go, which is down. And even going off that little drop, I came down, all of this mass, the inertia, comes down as well. It leads to the head slap, it leads to your body coming down like this. And if I went off of that drop and then entered a whole bunch of rocks after, I would be completely unweighted. Even worse, if that drop was 1 foot, 2 foot, 3, 5 feet bigger, I would be scorpioning head first into the dirt, because you can only lift so high with your arms, and then the bike's gonna start diving, and then you're just along for the ride. And that's why it's really important on a small, slow speed drop to master this technique. So here we are with the proper technique again, even or very slightly front tire landing, smooth, in control, ready for whatever comes next. Also able to lean back more or set the front end down depending on how much air time I need. All right, so I really hope you guys take time and master this skill on a curb. I can't get over how important I really think this is to bike control and just discipline as a whole for skills across the board. Now, obviously, you can ride off a curb. Our next step here in progression, you can ride off of this, right? It's about axle high, so a bike will absolutely roll down this thing no problem, which is also why I think it's probably the great next step for progression. If you mess up, you'll be okay. But taking it to a little bit higher of a drop and not increasing your speed drastically is, I think, really important, because momentum will make up for a lot of skills that aren't quite perfected and finalized. So getting to a point where you can do a drop of this size as slow as possible is going to really demonstrate skill and mastery over this technique. But realistically, when you get to being out on the trail, you're gonna come into it with a little bit more momentum. So what you're gonna wanna be working on here is getting off that drop, landing in a composed manner, and imagining that you either have a hard corner or another obstacle just a bike length away. Because that's really why we're practicing these skills in a controlled environment, is to get better at them, so when you encounter them out in the wild, you're ready to go. All right, so as I said, I'm not even gonna pedal here. I just wanna go as slow as possible and show you guys what that can look like with almost zero speed and effort. Again, going fast isn't what this skill is about. It's about balance, control over that bike. So now we're gonna talk a little bit about the timing of how and when to deploy each of these moves. As you're approaching the drop, you're gonna wanna be taking a look. Obviously, your speed is gonna dictate how fast and how quickly you do each of the movements. The slower you're going, the more time you'll have, right? And the later you're gonna wait. If you're going twice the speed, you need to do it twice as fast and you need to start earlier. I've seen a lot of videos where people come in to a drop and they get right here and they only pull up with their arms. And what happens? They're going like this and pulling. The bike is already on a downward trajectory. And that is probably one of the worst scenarios possible, because if you think of your arms as a rubber band, right? A rubber band isn't the strongest when it's the most stretched out. So when you're here, the bike is inches away from making contact with the ground, and you're here thinking that you're lifting up. And when that bike snaps you back down, there is so much more energy that's coming into it that very few riders are going to be able to hold on to that. And then this is never a place that you want to be. So as you're coming in, you want to set up and about, I would say about a wheel length back, right? If you look at where your front axle is in relation to the edge of the drop, when you get to about one wheel length, that's about where you'll want to get that quick little pop of a compression. And as you unweight from that little compression, again, we're not pushing really hard. We're not trying to bunny hop or do a jump or even get into a manual, but just that little bit of an unweight. And then here is where you want to rocket those feet forward, and you're just going to come off so that the bike nice and gently drops down. And again, right now we're landing on a flat drop, or I should say a flat landing, which is probably one of the rarer instances where you would really want a two-tire landing. Most of the times if you're encountering a drop on a trail, it's on a descent, so the ground will be going downhill, which means that you'll want to not quite pull up so hard and let that front wheel dip a little more so that the bike matches the angle of the trail. That will make for a smoother landing. And again, smooth is fast. Smooth is in control. It takes less energy. There's less rebound when it's smooth, so you're more settled and composed for what's coming next. Okay, so I'm gonna do 2 tries here with improper techniques just to show you guys the difference of what that looks like, body motion taking off, as well as what happens to the body and the bike when you land. All right, so this is the too late lifting with the arms technique. Oh man. So as you can see, there was just a lot of being a passenger and bouncing. That front wheel was on its way down by the time I picked up. You know, again, it's a slow enough or low enough drop to where you can roll out of it, but if you do that on a drop that's 5 feet, very different outcome. Now I'm gonna go too fast and pull up too hard. Okay, if you looked at that, I made it. I was down fine, but landed a little bit front or rear end heavy. So when that front tire came down, a little bit of a head slap, and that head slap takes you off sight of what you need to be focusing on, which is the next obstacle. All right, so we've made a pretty significant jump. We are now at a drop that's about handlebar height, and this could be outside of what you ever want to do, and that is 100% fine, no problem at all. Mostly we're just doing this for the riders who do want to take this skill and see how it is applied to a slightly larger obstacle. But for the rest of you guys, practice, practice, practice. That technique, do it on a sidewalk, do it off of a curb, do it until you can get that hold and drop no matter what speed you're at. Do it fast, do it slow, and just play with it over and over, and I promise it will reward you out on the trail. So that said, let's hit this bar high drop. We're gonna do it once at a slower speed with that technique, and then we'll show you what happens when you start going faster and carrying speed on a drop out on the trail. Oh, that was a little bit of a slower speed drop, doing that same technique, just coming into it, a little push and a thrust forward to get that wheel out. Nice composed 2-tire landing, off we went. All right, so for the next clip, I'm gonna show you guys kind of the next step in the progression of when you start hitting drops at speed. The faster you go, the more you can start to nose in, and the less of a thrust you're doing and the more you're sucking that drop up. You're trying to get back down to earth as quick as possible to carry momentum and exit speed, and you want to soften that landing, right? The softer the landing is, the faster you can attack again. All right, so as you saw, that was a bit faster. The technique was different. Rather than compressing and pushing. It was a little bit more of a pull up and pushing the bar back down, getting it back onto the ground as quick as possible so we don't carry ourselves too far out and have a harsher landing. Thank you guys again for tuning in for another video from our Back to Basics series. I really hope that this gave you guys some skills and techniques to practice. I can't express enough how much I really hope people take something and get something out of this video. And it just improves your skill, your safety, and your confidence on the trail. I have no doubt that if you take the time to perfect this skill, you will be rewarded and feel so much better and in control of your bike. Thank you guys very much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel, and we look forward to seeing you in future videos.